I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to the Good People Podcast.
Okay, ready?
I'm ready.
All right, we're rolling. A lot of times our elected officials get a bad rap, fairly so, but there are also a ton of genuinely good and decent people in elected office or running for elected office. The Good People Podcast highlights those who are doing good and selfless work for the American people. Today's guest has been a state legislator for the last 4 years. She's a CPA who audits businesses, and most importantly, she audits governmental bodies, which is a massive talent to bring to the General Assembly. She's a fellow Swiftie, more on that later. A mother of two, and most notably, she's my seatmate on the House floor, so we keep each other honest. Without any further ado, the wise and talented State Representative, Amy Elik. Amy, how's life?
Life is great. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I guess just to set the stage a little bit, today's Friday. We'll be airing this on Monday. And on Wednesday, we had a little bit of an interesting morning. We were in session until 4:45. You are one of the chief budgeteers for the Republican House Caucus. So I'm just curious, in your words, how would you replay how that session went? You know, just as far as your knowledge of the budget, what you expected to happen, and then ultimately the catastrophe, the chaos that ended up ensuing in the wee hours of the morning.
Well, I guess I would start with back in February when the governor introduced his plan for the budget for the year and laid out the variety of tax increases that he thought that he needed to balance the holes in the budget. You know, the day before his address, we got a preview from his staff, a very high level preview, although there were some surprises even in the speech itself. Like the grocery tax, for example, they had not previewed that for us. But as we went along during session, multiple attempts were made to reach out to the Democrats in the General Assembly, namely in the House side, with absolutely no help from them to get us involved. So I'm not super surprised by that, but we will always call them out on the fact that they won't allow us to, take part in those discussions. They also have so much dissension and trouble within their own caucus. I guess they figured they didn't want Republicans to be part of the mix in that. And really it took,
let alone a CPA who does really.
Right, exactly. God forbid we have some professionals in it, and we have a wonderful budget director in our caucus and on our staff, and he's fantastic. And we have offered use our experience and use our knowledge, and they absolutely do not. So when it came down to the last couple of weeks, I think we are not surprised that the Democrats fall into line. I've said it on the floor. They always fall into line. They always come around. They're always going to vote yes. They're always going to come along and do what the governor wants them to do. He's very powerful in their party. And then just amongst themselves, even though they have disagreed on many things, they always come around and they never seem to find ways to cut back and be reasonable and common sense. They always seem to go with like the nuclear option, which is raising $1 billion of taxes. But of course, they're just calling it revenue enhancements, which just is ridiculous. As you said during that long evening, that every dollar that comes into the state is a taxpayer dollar. And so they never hesitate to make sure to increase those taxpayer funds.
Yeah, we've really, I think, just seen an interesting evolution on the other side of the aisle as far as how words matter and what words mean. And, we don't hear the word mother, we hear birthing person, and we don't hear illegal immigrant, we hear newcomer. And, with tax increases, an interesting change has been revenue enhancements. And I think coming from the business world, revenue enhancements are a good thing, right? You want to grow revenue. But I think we need to remind ourselves that revenue for the state means it's coming from somebody else's pocket.
Exactly. And they don't ever hesitate to put those into place and then, mix up the language as if they're trying to confuse people, which is exactly what they're trying to do.
So as one of the lead budgeteers on the House Republican side, were you surprised when we went into Wednesday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and see the dissension? I mean, last year they passed it unanimously in the House, even though unanimously on the Democrat side in the House, even though 3 Democrat senators voted no. Then this year in the House, we see 7 Dems vote no, 6 not even vote for it. Did that surprise you that there was going to be that dissension, or did you expect them to have trouble with it?
It actually did surprise me. Whenever you see the vote count get over 40, which I think we had 38 Republican members, and then when it climbed above 38, 39, 40, you immediately start looking at the board. Who did it? Who did it? And you're looking at certain races, like local races here, and going, oh my gosh, that person voted no. And so it definitely surprised me. And that budget was the first vote, and then the BIMP was the second vote, I think. And then we did the grocery tax, and then we did finally the revenue package. And so with each vote, just looking to see who changed their vote and who did what. So it gets a little exciting at that point in time in a weird way that politicians get excited about government, like watching just the strategy behind it. And it also gives you a clue to who feels that they are a target and who the Democrats think is a target in their next races this fall.
Yeah. So, and for the listeners, in the House, it takes 60 votes to pass. So the budget passed with 65. The budget implementation passed with 62. And then we saw some interesting things happen on the revenue, which is interesting that they break them out because you can't have the budget. The budget is how you spend the money. The revenue bill is how you raise the money. So we saw it go from 65 votes on the budget down to just 60 on the revenue. But it took them a couple tries. Tell us about that.
It did. It was really quite exciting. So the first try on the revenue bill got exactly 60 votes. Well, the Republicans want all of the people that vote yes on any bill to make sure that they're sitting in their seat pressing their own button, because many people don't know. Sometimes if you're off the floor, the staff will press the button for you. But when we ask for verification, we expect that everyone will have been in their seat and voting their own switch. So when they got to 60 and then we asked for verification, I think we knew there were some of the people on their side that had already left the building. One of those was one of their leaders, Aaron Ortiz, who I think rumor had it he had left an hour or so before, and people had seen him leaving, but his switch was voted yes. So when it came time for verification and we asked for him to stand up and, say, yes, I'm here. Of course, he wasn't there. He was nowhere to be found. The Democrats can hold that open for a while and give someone that's on campus time to get to their seat. And they have certainly done that before. But if you're halfway back to Chicago, you're not going to make it. And I think they quickly realized he's not going to make it. So they had to withdraw his yes vote, which only gave them 59. So they didn't have the votes. So at that point in time, then they were scrambling to figure out, all right, we're going to have to redo this vote, but who's going to be our 60th? So then the second time around, and there was procedural back and forth in all of this as well.
Yeah.
And this took a long time, and we were waiting, and you could see the people in the well looking at rules and on the phone trying to figure out what the next step was. But ultimately, they did the vote again, and failed again. And lo and behold, there was a Democrat who wanted to be a no, but was going to be a yes to get it over the hump that time, since they couldn't count on Leader Ortiz. And he was watching the board and everyone was watching the board. Well, he saw it get to 61. So he took himself off and made himself a no again, leaving with 60. Well, we had also, of course, called for verification. And what a shock. Actually, a Republican had voted yes and then promptly left the floor.
Yeah.
And so when the verification came time, our Republican member had already left the floor and couldn't be found. And so they were back at 59 again. So procedurally, they should have not been able to do any more votes. So, of course, immediately they just decide to suspend the rules and vote to suspend the rules so that they can vote again. And it was funny because people voted to suspend the rules that had voted no on the bill itself. So, I mean, the whole thing was just, I guess, chaos, but also like a symphony. Like, you do this now, you do this now, we'll get it on the board. Those people who voted no because they had to, because their districts or because their race in the fall, but they knew that it needed to go through because they had already voted on the budget, which needed that $1 billion in new revenue. So they let the vote go through a third time. And then I think, what was the final vote? I think it was 6. It was exactly 60 again. That's right. And so,
Takes 60 to pass. It gets 59 once. It gets 59 twice. Parliamentary rules say you get 2 tries. You don't just get to sit here all night and keep trying again. So they come in, they suspend the rules, they break their own rules, twist another arm, get it to 60 votes. And I just think, how loudly do the people of Illinois need to say we don't want tax increases when it takes them 3 tries and breaking their own rules to get it done? Amy, I thought you did a great job with your floor speech. I want to play a clip for you, and then I'm going to have you react to it.
Okay. Done differently. Well, just a couple weeks ago, the governor's office put out a memo suggesting that agencies should prepare for cuts of $800 million if the tax increases weren't approved. Thus began the pearl clutching to think that anyone should suggest that state government find ways to cut back so that taxes wouldn't have to be raised. Now, come on, anyone in this room who has ever sat in an approps hearing or the Legislative Audit Commission knows that our agencies could be more efficient and could do it with less dollars. But no, this body instead decided to raise taxes, spend more, and give politicians yet another pay raise.
I just think that's so spot on because it seems like whenever challenges arise, you can either cut costs or you can raise taxes. And the cutting of the costs conversation lasted for about 10 seconds. And then it went to the tax raises. And included in those tax raises is higher legislator pay. So I guess what do you make of it? Just, seeing what you see, how, just philosophically, we're just so far away from, I think, where a competitive state would be.
That is a good point. It's just a philosophical difference between how Democrats want to rule the state on the backs of the people and the businesses here, and Republicans would naturally go to do what families do, which is, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to change my buying habits to make ends meet because prices are so high. But nope, the government instead just decided to, you know what, let's just make everybody pay more and keep in place the waste and the inefficiencies that we have in state government, which, as I said, every department that comes before a budget hearing, we know there's waste. We know they pad their budgets to get a little bit of extra. And it's just shameful that we couldn't find some way to cut back $800 million or more and avoid those tax increases.
Yeah, I think about it kind of like, let's say you walk into a restaurant and they've got staff standing around and it's the middle of winter and the heat's cranked up and you just see waste all over the place and you think, how the heck does this place stay in business? That's kind of what it's like when we see these agencies come in. And, I really am a strong believer that if we had a strong governor, we could cut costs so quickly. Now, there's some costs that can't really go away. You got to pay for schools, you got to pay for the pension. There are some costs that are pretty sticky. But when you tell me you got a $53 billion budget and you can't find waste in it, just give me a break.
Exactly. And they only come in front of the Legislative Audit Commission when they've been terrible stewards of money. And we have plenty of people lined up to come in front of that commission and hear how they messed up their spending or their compliance with various things. And it's just sad that we just forget about the cuts, don't even mention the cuts, and just go straight to the tax increase. And that's really what the Democrats did.
Now, I guess pivoting from there to your work as a CPA, you do audits of governmental bodies, and I love that you're a CPA. And I study finance, which I feel like is a sibling to accounting. Mm-hmm. And I hate when people just think of it as being bean counters or think of it as being a boring job, because I really think that finance accounting, that's how you learn the language of business. So I'm just curious to hear from your experience doing audits of businesses, governmental bodies, anything you've ever found that's been surprising to you or that has raised red flags, and then how that experience has carried over to the work that you do as a state, both in your own policy and evaluating different agency budgets, is how you leverage that experience.
Well, I've been a CPA for 29 years now and worked in public accounting for 20 years, worked in the private sector, including I still work in the private sector. And I've done everything from like simple, what I call kind of like simple bookkeeping, which is great, honestly. Yeah, debits and credits, payroll, the things that small business owners do. I've done all of that kind of stuff. And I've done the audits of a community college, audits of just school districts and small businesses and manufacturers, and consulting with businesses. And I've also helped small businesses figure out how to get started. So volunteered with a program several years ago that would teach entrepreneurs how to get started. And I always taught like the basics, the balance sheet, the income statement, the profit and loss activities of a business, and how do you report those. And I always really enjoyed that. And just being in touch with small business owners now, um, the burdens that they have on them, I fully understand. But back to really the auditing side, I think the benefit of auditing is you learn how to analyze, whether it's government entity or business entity. And I think that's really the biggest key. And it does take some time to really, like, they could kind of teach you that in school, but it does take a lot of years of experience to really look at a set of numbers and go, oh no, this can't be right. There's something going on here. And I really enjoy that. And so I still do that on my role on the Legislative Audit Commission and on General Services Appropriations, and just with the budget activities in general. And so, especially with government accounting, which frankly was not my favorite accounting in college. That was not like what I thought I would really. I really, I mean, who likes that? Who would like that, right? So just with the funds and things, you see that what they're doing here in Illinois is just making transfers from available funds that are, away from the purposes it was intended for. And it is so incredibly frustrating.
Well, this year, a big one was the road fund.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell the listeners a little bit about just what happened this year. And, we had the lockbox, and it was supposed to solve a certain purpose. And then now the governor sees a pile of money here and he wants it. So.
Yep. So many people probably don't realize this, within the budget is $200 million of transfers from road fund activities, things that we think of as for the road fund, into mass transit, which certainly is transportation related. But I think that when people pay their gas taxes, they're not thinking about their gas taxes going towards Chicago mass transit or even downstate mass transit. They're also taking, so that's $75 million for each of those purposes. And then they're taking $50 million from the leaking underground storage tank fund, and they're putting that towards road items. That money in past years has come from general revenue funds instead of from those specific funds. So it's caused a lot of consternation amongst the road builders, because they see those funds going, loosely related to transportation, but that's not what the spirit of that lockbox was for. And that's really frustrating, but especially to my downstate folks down here, that we are heavily reliant on vehicles, because we don't have, we don't have transportation that can answer all of our day-to-day needs of getting back and forth around town. So we expect that should go towards our roads and bridges. But it's just an accounting gimmick, really, to, instead of having to use general revenue funds for those expenses, we're going to use this other stuff. And hey, everybody, look over here instead of here. And it just redirects people's focus away from what those funds are really for. And it's just a perfect example of how the governor does business.
Yeah, and so I think you've highlighted just how great the experience is to bring to the state, just a background that you can leverage for the state's value. And so I kind of want to get into what made you want to get into this in the first place. So you were elected before me. You were in 2020. And as I was kind of preparing for this, I saw that you unseated a Democrat incumbent by 10 points. I didn't realize that you unseated somebody, which is a challenge of itself. And then you did it by almost a double-digit margin. So
yeah.
What made you want to do it? And then once you decided to, how heavy of a lift was it to unseat somebody by that much?
So my district has been held by Democrats for at least 50 years. So Madison County has always been blue collar, more like, I guess, moderate Democrats, and have flipped, literally flipped in the last, I'd say, 10 to 15 years. And our county board is now all Republican, or I'm sorry, the county office holders, countywide office holders are, as of December 1st, will be all Republican. So things have made a massive shift in a very short amount of time. But it was from years and decades of work by a lot of people in Madison County to pick seat by seat and figure out where we can make gains. So it's been something to watch. But I'm not one that grew up in politics. My parents are. One was a Republican, one was a Democrat, and we kind of talked about stuff, but they would never have run for office. However, I more recently have found out my grandmother actually was a Republican precinct committee woman in Madison County for many years. So that makes me feel very happy that I really didn't know that growing up, and wouldn't have even known what that meant, frankly. But we as a CPA, you see the effect of state policy on small businesses, on healthcare facilities, on nonprofits, all these people that for many years were waiting months and months and months to get their payment from the state. And you also see what that means is those business owners are putting out their own dollars out of their own pocket, or putting their, livelihoods on the line, like guaranteeing a loan with their own home and things like that. And you see the risk that they're taking. And so just over a period of time, watching that frustration from this, regarding the state of Illinois and how it does things, it's kind of hard to watch. A former boss of mine, actually, he always said before Illinois did the tax increase, we really need a tax increase. And he's a mentor of mine and a dear friend, but boy, I couldn't have disagreed more with him over that. But it was just kind of those discussions and how does this affect healthcare and entities that provide services to people. So, but really what happened was, in 2010, I think, I actually was at a business event and met my county board person who had recently been appointed to the county board. And I introduced myself and said, "Oh, I'm a CPA in business." And she was is an attorney. And a couple days later, she called me and said, "Hey, I need a treasurer for my campaign for county board. Would you help me?" And I thought, well, okay, as an accountant, you're supposed to bring in new business and get involved in your community. And I thought, well, I don't really know how to be a campaign treasurer, but I guess I could figure it out. So I did that, and she won her county board seat in 2010. And then about a year later, got invited to a dinner. Didn't really know what I was getting into. And she announced that she was running for state representative in the district I sit in now. And that would be in 2012. So afterwards I said, "Did you still want me to be your treasurer?" She's like, "Yeah, of course." I'm like, "Okay, well, I really had no idea what I was getting into then." I got a promotion and I did not realize that was such a full-time job. But interestingly, she was actually running against a person that the incumbent was a client of the firm that I worked for. And while I didn't really know him very well, my family did and many people did. So I know my boss said, you can do it, but it has to be on your own time. I said, "Okay, that's fine." So I spent a lot of time helping with that campaign and got to know people. But through that campaign, also saw these are just normal, everyday people that are running for these seats, got to know Madison County Republicans. And I think realized if she could do it, I could do it. And if, other guy could do it that's running for something else could do it, I could certainly do it. And I think just had over years in my career built some confidence in myself, and then actually ended up getting appointed to my township board. Saw an opportunity because I knew a neighbor was moving and was going to be leaving the township board. Had never been one interested in the township, but realized, you know what, we need good people to do these jobs. So I got appointed to the township board, and for 7 years was on the township board. Loved that. Would still be there had I not won my state rep race, because I really do love township government and the people that I worked with there. But we had some.
I thought one me when you said you didn't love government auditing, and then you lost it. You said you don't love government.
Well, you know what? I think I've always said, like, you can call it nosy if you want, but I'm just really inquisitive and I like to know what's going on in my community. So I always felt like I knew what was going on in my community and got to know a lot of people. So, and of course, the accounting background helps at the township level too, because it's a small rural township. A lot of things are still, pen to paper instead of computerized. So I think I was helpful in hopefully modernizing a little bit, but ultimately I'll tell you a little story here that I don't tell a lot of people.
Okay.
But
tell the world.
In 2018, my daughter, who grew up riding horses, went to a horse show in Oklahoma City, and let's just say it didn't go well. And this was a big deal. This is the Arabian Nationals, and it did not go well. The horse hadn't even gotten there yet and was already sick. It had to be quarantined, taken to a very expensive vet. Like we lost a lot of money and she was devastated. And I said, "We are never doing this again. This was out of our league. We shouldn't have done this. We're not doing it." And she said, "Oh yes, I'm going back next year and I'm going to find a way." And I said, "No, you're not. We're not doing this. We don't have the money. We're not doing it." Well, here we come, summer of 2019. She did. She made the case. We went back. Same horse. This horse was fine after we got home the first time, but we actually went back and she knocked it out of the park. Great show. She won like third place in one round in nationals, fourth in another. She rode dressage, and like the pride that I had, and oh gosh, I don't want to get emotional here, but just remembering the pride and the excitement of somebody who says, "Oh no, I'm going to do it no matter what. No matter what you think we're going to do, we're doing this." And just the success she had was really impactful on me, especially as a mom. And so it was soon after that show in about July of 2019, after I got home, and I had been thinking about like, what do I want to do here? The company I worked for was going to be making some changes, I knew. So I kind of was looking at like, what's my next step in my career and in life? And I think seeing her drive and her ambition and her success just really energized me. Like, I can do anything I set my mind to. And so after I got home from there, I called a couple friends and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about running for something. And frankly, county auditor sounds really boring." And
You
so
want me back?
exactly. And so what do we think? And I said, who's running against the state rep? And he said, "Well, I don't know. I don't think we have anybody." I said, "Well, I'm interested." And I'll tell you, that was on a Thursday. By 24 hours later, I had a call from the House Republicans, and they said, "I have a lot of people telling me you'd be really great for this and we need to talk." And I said, "That's fine." I said, that was about 4:30 on a Friday. I said, "That's great. Let's definitely talk, but I have not even talked to my husband about this. So if you don't mind, I think I probably need to talk to him." And I was in my office at home, and he was making dinner, and I went out and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about running for state rep. Is that okay?" He's like, "Yeah, that's fine. Whatever." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So next thing you know, I'm in. So it was the rest of 2019. And then of course, all of 2020, getting petitions running. I mean, March of 2020, the world closed. How in the world do we have to run a campaign in COVID? And so when we got to November of 2020 and we actually won, I am still stunned that I'm here today. And it was, something I'll never forget.
So, and not only are you here today, you're seriously kicking butt. I mean, you're in your second term. You're a member of leadership, which there's 40 House Republican members. There's 8 or 9 that are in leadership. You're one of them. You host a breakfast for the Illinois manufacturers, which I think is a pretty big honor. They're one of the most respected business associations, and they ask you to be the Republican lead for their monthly breakfast. You were the Building and Construction Legislator of the Year. So, gosh, 2 terms, and you're kicking butt. So, and I'd also say I just appreciate how you do it, because I think that people that work in politics that also have an outside job are just so untouchable. Because if you don't depend on getting reelected, nobody can control you. Whereas there's a lot of people really on the other side that this is their livelihood. And so when they need to have a vote to get the speaker or whomever or some lobbyist to re-support them to run again next year, they're really in a bind, because if they don't get reelected, they lose their job. And I just think it's great that you are still active in business, and I know that you want to win. You're going to work like hell to make sure you keep coming back. But if it didn't go your way, it's not like you're going to sacrifice your soul or your values just to win some election. Because you're set in your marriage and your kids and your business. I mean, you're kind of untouchable.
Yeah, I think that's really important for people to always know that there's something beyond politics, because if you don't have that and you get beat, you're going to be pretty devastated. But if you always know, like, I'm probably going to be doing something else later, then you just have a healthy attitude towards the whole thing and know that it's not the end of the world if you lose an election. So yeah, staying in the industry. I'll give you one example where that was really helpful here recently, and that was on the Paid Leave Act, which went into effect the beginning of this year. As we were voting on that, I literally am probably the only one in the General Assembly that does payroll every 2 weeks for a small business. So I had to think about, like, not just, oh, is this a good idea and what's the policy aspect, but how is this going to be implemented? And I had to think about, like, how am I going to do this for the company that I work for? And how do we, like, what are the pitfalls? And I think that's been helpful, explaining it to other small business owners. And here's why they made the choice of what they did. And here's how I implemented it. And I can go back to accounting world. I can go back to auditing world. There will be plenty of jobs. There's a shortage of those positions now. I'm going to be okay no matter what. Also, just as you get older, you get a little more confident in yourself, and like, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. So yeah, I love the job. This is a fantastic job, and I want to stay in it. But do I want to stay in it forever? No. That's just, I don't think anyone should want to stay here forever. So
So one last topic that's a little bit off the wall from where we've been going, is I want to pick your brain on what you think is misunderstood about the Second Amendment. And the reason that I ask you that is because you're a 5 foot, I don't want to know, short, 5'2" female, and you're a big advocate of concealed carry. You have concealed carry yourself, and I just think it's a prime example of, I think everybody thinks about machine guns and these macho things, but for somebody like you, I think it's just really common sense, and I know you're a big supporter of it, so just curious to hear your take on that.
I did not grow up around guns. My parents didn't own any guns. My dad didn't hunt. It was actually just a few years ago, I actually found out my mom has shot before because she had older brothers. And so I was like, what? We never, ever talked about this kind of stuff at home. When I married my husband, his family, his dad worked for Olin Winchester for his whole career, and they were hunters and shooters and have space to, target, shoot, and shoot trap and things like that. So it's sort of, we've been married almost 27 years this year, but so it's not like something I grew up around. So, but I also never grew up around being afraid or being told that guns were bad. And so, I was very accepting of just the lifestyle of exercising your Second Amendment rights. And with my husband's family being so passionate about that, it just kind of rubbed off, I guess. And I'm not afraid of guns. I am afraid that I could not protect myself if I didn't have one. So I think that's really important. The misconception about the Second Amendment is that it's for hunters and that this is so that they can hunt. And that's not really what it's about. It's about a right that you have to defend yourself and your family. So yeah, my husband and I both have had our concealed carry since it first came into existence in Illinois, and just recently requalified. And we just enjoy the shooting sports and have taught our kids safety and how to handle guns responsibly. My son's on a trap team, and the kids on that team are all responsible with their guns, and they don't use these as people, I think that Second Amendment advocates do.
Yeah. I think most people do immediately go to the hunting component, but my dad loves to hunt, and so I'll do one pheasant hunt with him a year because I like to be with him. I'm not a big hunter, but I have a handgun in a safe locked up near my bed, and I don't really live so much in the country anymore, but I did when I bought it. And that's the entire reason that I had it, is because, I lived kind of in a house sort of on its own. And if somebody ever came in the middle of the night, it was me versus them. And I just wanted to make sure that I had that thing.
Yeah. Our property where we have in Fosterburg is, 20, I always say it's 20 minutes from anywhere, but that also means it's 20 minutes from the nearest deputy sheriff. So I have just tried to make sure that I can protect myself and my family, and I hope to God I never have to.
So from there, the obvious transition, I promised the folks that we touch on the Swifties. So before I let you go, I got to know, karaoke song, Taylor Swift, if you're up on the stage, which one of her many ballads would you say is your first pick to go to as your Taylor Swift karaoke song?
So I would say, Wouldn't You Dream About the 10-minute All Too Well version. Travis, you and I should definitely take that on sometime.
Yeah.
However, that is very ambitious. But think about Look What You Made Me Do. That's a fun one, right? And maybe, gosh, I don't know. What's yours?
Blank Space, Shake It Off, our song. I've karaoke'd our song many a time.
Yeah.
Like the sliding screen door, sticking out late, tapping on your window.
I even like Begin Again, or oh my gosh, there's so many.
I know. It's like picking a favorite.
Exactly. It is. It is. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Amy, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much. I look forward to talking with you maybe another time. And as always, see Amy on the house floor sitting next to me.
Thank you. Thanks.
Awesome.